"You're too old to handle this place anymore. Dad, maybe it's time you move into assisted living." That's what my son, David, told me one frosty December evening in the dining room of the very house I built with my own two hands. The roast on the table had barely cooled, and the Christmas lights outside were still flickering when those words hit me like a hammer. My own flesh and blood, dismissing me like a burden. His wife, Kelly, didn't even look surprised. If anything, there was a shadow of a smirk on her lips. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, my fork frozen in midair, staring at the oak table I had bought 35 years ago from a carpenter in town. It had scratches, burn marks, and grooves from every Thanksgiving, every birthday, every family game night we ever had. That table held my life, but to my son, it was just clutter. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us where you're watching from. My name is Richard Hale. I'm 68 years old, retired from 39 years at John Deere in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I worked the assembly line most of my life, pulling double shifts when David was a boy so we could afford this house. I remember the smell of oil on my hands, the ache in my back, and how my wife, Margaret, would stay up waiting for me, warming up dinner so I never had to eat cold food. She's been gone 5 years now. Cancer. It left a hole in this house no one could ever fill. David promised me back then that we'd always stick together, that he'd never leave me alone. But grief changes people. Or maybe greed reveals who they truly are. After Margaret passed, David and Kelly moved in temporarily to help out. At first, I was grateful. The house felt less empty, and I thought maybe we'd heal together. But months turned into years, and suddenly, they weren't guests anymore. They acted like owners. They redecorated, replaced my old recliner with some showroom piece that didn't even fit me, and told me I should be grateful they were modernizing the place. Grateful. That word stung more than I admitted. I tried to overlook the little things, Kelly calling it her kitchen, David rearranging my garage without asking. But that night, when he told me I was too old for the house I'd poured my life into, I knew something had shifted. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice steady, though my chest burned. David set his fork down and leaned back like he'd rehearsed this. "Dad, it's just, this place is too much for you. The maintenance, the stairs, the bills. Kelly and I have been talking, and we think it's best for you to sell the house. Downsize. Maybe get a condo or a retirement home," Kelly added, sipping her wine. I looked at them both. My son, with my hazel eyes but none of my patience. My daughter-in-law, with her polished smile that never reached her eyes. I realized then this wasn't concern. This was ambition. They wanted my house. I swallowed hard, staring at the lights on the Christmas tree reflecting in the window. The same tree Margaret and I used to decorate with David when he was small. He'd beg to put the star on top, standing on my shoulders while she laughed. Now he wanted to push me out. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded slowly and said, "We'll talk about this later." But inside, something cracked. And in that crack, something cold and sharp grew. A resolve I hadn't felt in years. Because what David didn't know was that this house wasn't just mine. It was still in my name, deed and all. And I wasn't about to hand it over like some old coat I'd outgrown. As I cleared my plate, I could feel Kelly's eyes on me, measuring me like I was already half gone. That's when I decided, if they thought they could strip me of my dignity, they were in for a rude awakening, and Christmas dinner was just the beginning. 2 days after that dinner, I woke up to the sound of hammers and drills in my own garage. When I shuffled out in my slippers, there was David, my son, tearing down the old wooden shelves I built back in the late 80s, the ones that had held Margaret's gardening tools, the camping gear, Even David's Little League trophies I'd never had the heart to throw away. "What in God's name are you doing?" I asked, my voice echoing against the concrete walls. David didn't even look up. He just said, "We're reorganizing, Dad. The garage is wasted space the way you've had it. Kelly wants to turn this into a home gym." I blinked at him. "A home gym? What's wrong with the Y down the street?" He finally turned, sweat on his brow, eyes sharp. "Why do you always have to fight me on everything? This is our house, too." Our house. That phrase sat like a brick in my stomach. Kelly appeared in the doorway, holding a Starbucks cup. "Don't be so dramatic, Richard. It's not like we're tearing the place down. You'll still have your, corner." She pointed at the far wall like I was some tenant renting a patch of floor. I wanted to shout, to tell them both to pack their things and leave, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the cold cup of coffee Margaret's old percolator had brewed. It was becoming clear. They weren't planning on leaving. They were planning on taking over. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I walked quietly through the house with the lights off. I ran my hand along the banister I'd stained myself. I paused in the living room, remembering when Margaret and I had slept on an air mattress in that very spot before we could afford a real bed. Every inch of this house had a memory, a sacrifice, a piece of me, and now my son was acting like it was already his. The next morning, the insults started slipping in like knives hidden in casual sentences. "You shouldn't be shoveling snow. Dad, you could break a hip. You probably don't remember how to work the new thermostat, so I'll set it for you." Kelly and I were looking at retirement communities online. Some of them even have game nights. You'd love it. Each comment chipped away at me. They thought I was weak. They thought I was disposable. One evening, when I tried to sit in the recliner I'd bought right after my retirement, my chair, Kelly stopped me. "Oh, sorry, Richard. That chair really doesn't fit with the new look. We're thinking of donating it to Goodwill." I stared at her, then at David, waiting for him to defend me, but he just shrugged. "It's old, Dad. It squeaks." That chair had held me through football games, naps after long shifts, nights when grief crushed me after Margaret died. And they wanted to toss it like garbage. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. But inside, I felt something tightening. A week later, I overheard them in the kitchen late at night. I had come down for a glass of water, and their voices carried through the walls. "We can't keep waiting," Kelly whispered. "If he won't sell, maybe we can convince him legally. He's not all there anymore." "You think we can prove that?" David asked. "Easily," she said. "All it takes is a lawyer. If we show he's unfit to handle his own finances, the court will side with us. Then the house is ours." I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles went white. They weren't just trying to push me out. They were planning to take everything, through the courts if they had to. The betrayal burned hotter than anything I'd ever felt. My own son, conspiring with his wife to declare me incompetent. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing Margaret's voice in my memory. "Don't let anyone take what we built, Richard. Don't you dare." By dawn, I knew one thing. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But it wouldn't be the kind of fight they expected, because I still had the deed. I still had the bank connections. And I knew people in this town, lawyers, old co-workers, neighbors, who remembered who I was before David started painting me as some senile old man. I poured myself a black coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and began making a list. Step 1. Call my lawyer. Step 2. Visit the county clerk's office. Step 3. Remind my son who really owned this house. I may have been 68, but I wasn't dead yet, and I was about to show them just how alive I still was. I woke up the next morning with a plan as clear as the Iowa winter sky. No yelling, no fits of rage, just calm, deliberate action. I brewed my coffee, black as the thoughts running through my mind, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Step 1, document everything. Step 2, get legal advice. Step 3, let the system work for me, not against me. I called my old friend and lawyer, Tom Henderson, who had been handling my affairs since I bought this house. His office smelled of polished wood and leather-bound books. Comforting, like the solid backbone of small-town justice. "Tom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need to protect my property. My son and daughter-in-law are trying to push me out." There was a pause. "Then, Richard, tell me everything." I did. The garage incident, the dismissive comments, the late-night plotting I had overheard, every little insult, every little attempt to make me feel useless. Tom listened carefully, making notes. "You still have the deed in your name, right?" he asked finally. "I do. Full ownership. And they're not on the mortgage, not on any loan, not on anything. This is my house. Good. That gives us leverage. But we need proof of intent. Emails, messages, witness statements, anything that shows they're trying to manipulate you or the house legally." I nodded, jotting down ideas. I'd been quiet for too long. I'd been polite. Now, it was time to let reality speak for me. Over the next few days, I quietly gathered evidence. I printed the emails David had sent me, suggesting I consider retirement options. I noted Kelly's comments about donating my furniture. I even recorded small conversations, nothing illegal, just audio of their insistence that I was too old, too frail, too incapable. Meanwhile, I visited the county clerk's office to double-check the property records. Every signature, every transaction, every legal document, mine. The house was mine, full stop, and that knowledge felt like armor. But I didn't want to act recklessly. This was about strategy. Small-town Iowa is full of people who talk, and I intended to use that. I casually mentioned my situation to neighbors I trusted. "David's being a little pushy," I said one afternoon at the hardware store. "I might need some advice about keeping the house in the family." Word spread, quietly, carefully. By the time David realized I wasn't just simmering, the town already knew someone was taking his side. Me. I even revisited the bank that held the mortgage. They had records of my payments for decades, every single one made on time, in full. If David tried to claim financial incompetence, the bank statements would tell a different story. Then came the phone call that made my heart thump with a mix of hope and cunning satisfaction. "Richard, this is Marcy from Cedar Rapids Title Services," the voice said. "I was just reviewing the file for 123 Maple Street. It's fully in your name, correct?" "Yes," I replied, masking the grin forming in my chest. "Good. I just wanted to confirm because we had a request for information from your son?" I smiled, letting the pause linger. "Yes, that's right. But I'll handle this." "Thank you, Marcy." They were poking around. They were trying to find a loophole, a way to pressure me, but I had already blocked every angle. By midweek, I was ready to escalate quietly. I met Tom at his office to review a step-by-step plan. Official letters. Lawyers would send formal letters to David and Kelly, making clear that the house was my property, that any attempt to claim authority over it would be legally challenged. Witness statements. Neighbors, friends, and even former co-workers could corroborate the pattern of manipulation and insults. Financial audit, bank statements, property deeds, and mortgage records would show my competence and control. "Richard," Tom said, looking over the documents, "this isn't revenge. It's protection. But make no mistake, when they see this, they'll know you mean business." I nodded, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Calm certainty. That evening, I made one last careful sweep of the house. I ran my hand over the banister again, opened drawers Margaret had used, looked out at the snow-covered yard. Every inch of this place was mine. And soon, David and Kelly would realize that they hadn't inherited anything. They had only made themselves look greedy and foolish. As I sat down in the kitchen with a fresh notebook, I wrote 3 words at the top of the page: wait, watch, win. Because I wasn't just going to defend my house. I was going to reclaim my dignity, my respect, and maybe even teach my son the price of betrayal. And when the time came, they wouldn't see it coming. The morning of the family dinner, the air in Cedar Rapids was crisp, the snow crunchy underfoot. I wore my old navy coat, the one Margaret had knitted years ago, and carried myself with the calm certainty of a man who knew the truth and had all the evidence to prove it. David and Kelly had been bragging all week, thinking they had the upper hand. They even mentioned inviting a few neighbors, apparently to show how modern and organized the house had become. Little did they know, the neighbors were already on my side. When they opened the door to greet me, I smiled warmly, masking the storm inside. "Hey, Dad," David said, clearly trying to sound casual. "Glad you could make it." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice calm, almost serene. Inside, the table was set perfectly. Sparkling china, polished silver, a roast gleaming under the chandelier. Kelly had clearly tried to impress, but I wasn't here to be impressed. I was here to reclaim what was mine. Dinner began with polite chatter. David and Kelly exchanged those subtle glances that betray confidence, the kind that says, "We're in control." But I had a surprise waiting, and I could feel it building in the room like static electricity. Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork and said, "Before we start dessert, I need to address something." David's smirk faltered. Kelly's eyebrow shot up. "What is it?" David asked, trying to regain composure. I reached into my briefcase, hidden under the table, and pulled out a thick envelope. "This," I said, letting the papers rustle loudly, "is a complete record of this house, the mortgage, my finances, and legal documents showing full ownership. Every email, every conversation where you two tried to manipulate me or push me out is documented." A hush fell over the table. The neighbors, friends I had invited under the guise of casual company, looked on with quiet satisfaction. David's face turned red. "Dad, what is this?" "I'll tell you what it is," I said slowly, savoring every word. "This is reality. This house is mine. The deed, the mortgage, everything. And any attempt to claim otherwise will be met with legal action. I've already spoken to Tom Henderson, my lawyer. He says I am fully within my rights." Kelly's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Richard, you can't—" "Oh, I can," I interrupted gently. "And I will. Because this isn't just about a house. It's about respect. Something you both have forgotten how to show." I pulled out a small folder of witness statements next. Neighbors, former co-workers, and friends have all testified about the repeated attempts to pressure me into selling, about the insults, about the manipulations. You may have thought this house could be taken quietly, but Cedar Rapids has a long memory. And so do I. David opened his mouth, but I cut him off again. And finally, the bank statements, showing all mortgage payments made on time, in full, for decades. The financials prove competence. The house isn't yours. It never was. And trying to claim it, legally or otherwise, will only humiliate you further. The silence was deafening. Even the snow seemed to hush outside, as if the town itself was watching. I looked around the table, meeting David's eyes. "You called me old, useless. You laughed at me for still living here, for still wanting to honor what Margaret and I built. But let me tell you something, son. Age is not weakness. And love, respect, and integrity aren't transferable. You cannot inherit them. They must be earned," David stammered, his bravado crumbling. I just thought—" "You thought wrong," I said, voice calm, precise, almost surgical. "Everything you've tried to do, I've already seen it coming. And now, it ends. Tonight, I set down the folders. The neighbors nodded, subtle but firm. Their quiet support was a reminder that greed never goes unnoticed in a small town. Kelly covered her face with her hands. How did you— I planned, I said simply. Quietly. Calmly. Because revenge is sweetest when it's inevitable. And tonight, it is. David slumped back in his chair, realizing that his entitlement had evaporated. The table felt heavier now, each bite of food tasting like consequences. I poured myself a cup of coffee, just like I always had, savoring the aroma, the warmth. Margaret's absence still hurt. But tonight, I felt her presence in every corner of this house I'd fought to protect. Because the house wasn't just walls and floors. It was memories, sacrifices, and a lifetime of love, and no one could take that from me. And as the room sank into stunned silence, I knew this was only the beginning of their reckoning. Outside, the snow began to fall heavier, covering Cedar Rapids in a quiet blanket. Inside, justice was being served at the table, one calm, deliberate moment at a time. The days following that dinner were quieter than I expected, but Cedar Rapids has a way of making news travel without headlines. By Monday, the town knew the story. Richard Hale, the man who built his life from nothing, had quietly, calmly, and thoroughly defended his home from greedy hands. David and Kelly tried to spin their version, complaining about overbearing parents and small-town gossip. But everyone who knew us, the neighbors, the old co-workers, even the clerks at the county office, sided with me. The bank called first. "Mr. Hale," the manager said, "thank you for confirming your financial records. Everything is in order. There will be no legal complications from your son's inquiries." Then came the lawyer's letter, formal, concise, and final. Any attempt to challenge my ownership or to declare me unfit would be met with full legal force. David called that evening, his voice low and shaky. "Dad, can we talk?" he asked. I leaned back in my chair, remembering Margaret's voice in my head. "Never meet them with anger alone. Let the truth do the work." "I'm listening," I said. I didn't realize—" His words trailed off. "You tried to take what wasn't yours, David," I said evenly. "And now you see the consequences. But I'm not interested in punishing you forever. What you need is respect. And respect can't be demanded. It has to be earned." There was a pause. Finally he said, I'm sorry, Dad. I really am." "Actions speak louder than words," I replied. "I hope you understand that now." He didn't argue further. He knew the fight was over. Over the next few weeks, I settled back into the rhythm of my life. The house, once under threat, now felt like a sanctuary again. I went for walks around Cedar Rapids, the snow crunching under my boots, neighbors waving and smiling. There was a sense of quiet triumph in those greetings, an acknowledgement that sometimes patience and planning are stronger than brute force. I even took small comfort in the details David and Kelly had tried to change. The old recliner, the oak table, the banister. They remained exactly as they had been. Each piece was a reminder that memory and love cannot be erased. At the hardware store, a neighbor named Carl came up to me. "Richard," he said, grinning, "I heard how you handled that mess. Damn proud of you." I smiled, feeling warmth I hadn't felt in months. "Thanks, Carl. It wasn't easy, but some things are worth standing up for." Even the little things felt sweeter now. I could walk into the kitchen without tension. I could sit by the fireplace, hear the quiet hum of the heater, smell Margaret's favorite cinnamon candle burning in the background. The house wasn't just safe. It was alive again, full of the echoes of the life I had built, the love I had poured into it, and the dignity I had reclaimed. Weeks later, David and Kelly moved out quietly. They rented a small condo downtown, far from Maple Street, far from the house they'd tried to claim. The neighbors whispered, some with judgment, some with quiet relief. And me, I stayed. I stayed in the house that bore my name, my story, my history. I painted the front door a fresh coat of deep red, Margaret's favorite color, and it looked like a sunrise against the winter sky. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not because I had humiliated my son, but because I had stood firm, calmly. And without losing my dignity, on a Sunday morning, I poured myself a cup of coffee, black as always, and sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the windows. I thought about Margaret, about David, about the battles fought and the ones avoided. I felt the weight of history in this house, every memory intact, every sacrifice honored. And I whispered quietly to myself, justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just being strong enough to hold on to what's yours. That night, as the snow fell again, I looked out the window, a deep sense of satisfaction filling me. The house was mine. My dignity was intact, and the people who had tried to betray me had learned, at last, the cost of greed and disrespect. Life in Cedar Rapids returned to its quiet rhythm. The town moved on, the snow melted, and I lived in my home surrounded by the memories of a lifetime, proof that sometimes patience, planning, and calm courage are the most powerful forms of revenge. I picked up Margaret's old knitting basket, smiled at the quiet warmth of the house, and whispered, "We did it. We kept our home. We kept our peace. And for the first time in a long while, I felt fully at home." Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.